welcome to Let's Get Talking About Stewardship, an information evening organised by the Church of Scotland Stewardship team. The aim of this event is to outline our key resource, which is called A Narrative of Generosity, and to show you how it might be used in your congregation. My name is Pauline Wilson. I'm one of 4 stewardship consultants who make up the team. Ashley Johnston, Fiona Penny, and Margot Robertson are also here tonight. We'll be hearing from them shortly. We're pleased that the General Treasurer, Anne McIntosh, and the Deputy Treasurer for Congregational Finance, Leanne Thompson, are with us this evening. We can see Leanne anyway. We'll be hearing from them hopefully in the Q&A bit later as well. In addition, we're delighted to be joined by the Chief Officer, Dave Kendall, who will be saying a few words later, just before the Q&A. The presentation tonight will last for about 45 minutes. Fiona will introduce us to the resource and give an overview. Ashley will take us through the time theme to show how that section of the resource can be applied in practice. Margot will hone in on the earth theme, rooting it in worship and theology. And I will end the presentation with a very quick run through the remaining 10 themes, spending just a minute on each one. We've allocated time at the end for questions, so please type your questions in as we go along using the Q&A facility. To find this, if you simply move your mouse until the toolbar appears at the bottom of your screen, then click on the Q&A icon. We've turned off all attendees' cameras and microphones. The event is being recorded so that it can be accessed and shared via our YouTube page. We'll circulate the link to everyone when that video becomes available. We'll also send you the Narrative of Generosity slides and a handout of the Q&A. Before we proceed, I would like to share with you 3 short quotes I read this week, which I think help point us in the right direction for tonight. The first one says, stewardship isn't just about sustaining the material of the church. It's about guiding those resources in service of the church's primary mission, proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. The second quote says, stewardship is more than giving. When you reduce stewardship to just giving money, you lessen the transformational power it can have in a person's life. And the final quote I want to share is, stewardship is not just us doing things for God, it's God with us, doing things together that are part of God's plan for creation and humankind. Let's start with a word of prayer. Loving God, we praise you for all you have made and the place you have given us within creation. Thank you for involving us in your work, for trusting us to be your stewards, and for helping us to be people who care, who nurture, who enable, and who give. May we try to reflect your giving and generous nature in every part of our lives. Be in our gathering this evening. Please use this time to inspire our thinking and to encourage us in this kingdom work. We pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. Fiona.
Thanks, Pauline. Before we get into the mechanics of the narrative of generosity, I would like us to start at the beginning, quite literally in the book of Genesis. We read in chapter 1 about the abundance of God's creation, providing all that we would ever need, given freely by a loving and generous God. It was good. We were created in God's image, called to reflect that joyful generosity, to be faithful and effective stewards, not just of creation, but of all that God has placed in our care. That call still stands today. Let our lives be a response, as part of our worship, by exercising our stewardship responsibilities, not just on a Sunday or for church-related activities, but in all areas of our life. Sadly, there is often an association between stewardship and scarcity. Our team have had many requests over the years for help from congregations because they feel they don't have enough, whether that's money or people, skills or young folk. And we're always delighted to help look at these issues, but we're also keen to help identify and highlight just how much God has given the congregation and the individuals within it. God has blessed us with so many things over which we have responsibility, and that is where our focus needs to lie, on the abundance, being diligent about how we care for, share, and grow our resources to be all that God wants us to be. Although historically within the church, the focus has often been on financial giving, along with time and talents, stewardship actually extends far beyond these boundaries. This is explored in the narrative of generosity, which seeks to address many different aspects of our lives. It is worth noting that although we are promoting this more holistic view of stewardship, in no respect should this be seen as a move away from or a weakening of the more traditional stewardship theme of money. On the contrary, we believe that adopting a whole life attitude to stewardship could have a greater, deeper, and longer lasting impact on financial giving than a purely money-focused approach might. That said, we are very aware of the unexpected financial challenges that many congregations are facing at the moment, and appreciate that many may well have to keep their focus on the stewardship of money initially. The narrative of generosity will be a useful tool in helping them do this. As buildings open again and church life continues to move towards what may be described as a new normal, a holistic view of stewardship will become vital for congregations as they seek to be all that they can be in supporting their communities and showing the love of Jesus in a real and tangible way. Sharing our stories is a key element of the narrative of generosity. So why stories, you may wonder? Well, everyone has a story. Whether we're 5 or 105, we have a story about our experiences, how we feel about things, the good and the bad, our hopes and our fears. Stories are how we often communicate with others, to help them understand our point of view, or express why we think like we do. It's when we listen and engage with each other's stories that we better understand the context of their situation, their desires, their direction. Stories can be very powerful, influencing us and changing our perspective. Often we form our opinions on first appearances, but hear the story behind the picture, and that can change our thinking about things altogether. It's not only individuals who have a story. The church has a story too. The story doesn't stop in the past though. Our story must continue. But once we know what our story is, we have the ability to evaluate it and determine its future direction. The narrative of generosity covers 12 different themes of stewardship. You can see that the more traditional themes of money, time, and talent, or gifts as we now call them, are very much still there, but we've introduced these new themes. These themes, such as relationships, mind, or youth, for example, may be new to our resource, but they've always been a very important part of church life. By including them and others within the narrative of generosity, the aim is to help congregations broaden their thinking and take a more holistic, whole life approach to stewardship, to be intentional in their conversations of how they best steward a wider perspective of church. We will look at the 12 themes in a bit more detail shortly. So let's first look at how to use the narrative of generosity resource. Each of the 12 themes are set out in the same way and give an opportunity to share stories with one another, to reflect on what's been shared, and then come up with a course of action based around that discussion. There are 4 slides for each theme. The first slide introduces the subject, outlines what our commitment to that theme might be, and affirms that all we do is for God's mission and God's glory. This is backed up by a scripture reference. The second slide delves a little deeper into the theme and gives pointers to encourage those participating to share their stories, which could be either from an individual or congregational perspective. The third slide of each theme encourages a time to reflect on all that has been shared, considering what has been an encouragement, made an impact, surprised or changed your thinking. The final slide is a call to action. Having shared and reflected, this is where you take all the information and set out a realistic and achievable plan for your next steps to address some of the priorities raised in your discussions. This would normally include a themed service or series of services, perhaps some teaching in the form of written material or Bible study, and some sort of practical activity, ideally involving as many of your congregation as possible. What those actions and next steps are will be different for each congregation, and indeed each time you look at that particular theme, they are likely to be different, depending on what your priorities are at that time. It is always vital before you start to consider how to get the best out of your narrative journey. The first decision to make is which theme to look at. This is entirely your choice. The themes don't come in any specific order, so feel free to start with the one that is most appropriate to your situation. You can work through the themes at your own pace, although we encourage you to keep stewardship on your Kirk Sessions agenda so it becomes an integral part of church life. It is also possible to revisit a theme before you cover all 12, but covering each theme at some point will ensure you get the most out of the narrative of generosity. Another important decision to make is who will be involved each time you look at a theme. This is up to the Kirk Session to decide, but we would suggest that in most cases, the wider the engagement, the better. Often those on the fringes of your congregation help bring a wider perspective, and it's a great way to get people involved. You can use existing groups and networks, or set up specific activities, as well as encourage sharing and reflecting through websites, social media, emails, newsletters, and your Sunday service. It's up to you to be creative in how you facilitate this. The stewardship team can help at any stage of your journey through the narrative, whether that's at the beginning to help you get started and choose a theme, to facilitate some of your discussions, or to help with ideas and resources for your action points. Now over to Ashley to hear some more about how to put the narrative into practice.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So let's look at one of the themes in more detail and see how it could be run in your congregation. For this example, we are going to be taking a closer look at the time theme. I'm sure that for many of you joining us this evening, you may have run many previous stewardship programs in your local settings around this theme, as it was one of the 3 previous stewardship themes of time, talents, and money. Hopefully, as we go through this, you will recognise that the core ideas and teachings of stewardship haven't changed. The importance of individual themes has not been lessened or diluted by the inclusion of 11 others, but instead, the narrative of generosity is offering a new, fresh approach to talk about stewardship in your congregations and to encourage as many different people as possible to engage in good stewardship practices. So as Fiona mentioned earlier, once a theme has been decided on, in this case time, the first step is to decide who you are going to engage in the process and how you are going to ask them to share, reflect, and act. We always encourage you to try and include as many people as possible, but this can look differently in different congregations. For example, I have had one congregation decide it was best for them to only ask the Kirk Session to share and reflect, and then they took forward the ACT points with the wider congregation. I have also had other congregations who decided they wanted their whole congregation to be part of the full process, and ran a cafe-style church for several weeks to discuss the questions raised, or others still have held workshop events outside of their regular worship. Once you find the format that is best for you and your congregation, it's time to start sharing. And for the time theme, here are the share prompts. It starts with a short background narrative that can be shared with the whole group, and this really sets the tone for the upcoming conversations. So here we can read, Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, God has made everything beautiful in its time and has set eternity in the human heart. This godly perspective encourages us to appreciate that what we do with our time has an eternal value. This is really the main point that we want participants to be thinking about and to be referring back to as they go through this process. So with that in mind, let's move on to our prompts. We are now asking those to take part to share stories about something. While we hope for most people they will be excited to share their experiences and understanding with others, we are aware that for some this might seem quite daunting. They might think that sounds quite personal, or it could be uncomfortable for them. Others might think that they don't have stories to share. And while those fears are understandable, they are not needed. Our share prompts and all other prompts within this resource are just conversation starters. The most important thing when leading people through a narrative of generosity theme is that everyone feels everyone taking part feels safe enough to share as much or as little as they would like, and that there is mutual respect from all of those taking part. I have sat in a Kirk session before when at the start of their share, reflect and act journey, they shared many of those concerns. But as one or two people shared their own stories, thoughts or experiences, that in turn acted as reminders and prompts for other people. And before they knew it, those initial trepidations had been replaced by relaxed and enjoyable conversations. So for example, using the first point on our share slide, we see the instruction, share stories about how you have spent time wisely and why you feel it was valuable. As you can see, this is a personal question and is specific to the individual answering it, but there is still a great deal of flexibility in it. Some might go into specific details about a special project or hobby that they have, and the sense of fulfillment that it brings them, making it time well spent. Others might talk about their daily Bible study or devotional, how it is really valuable for setting up their day right and helping them focus their heart on God. Others may want to say something as simple as when I spend time with my family, friends, and loved ones. I find that really valuable. Depending on how you are running your session, you may wish to have facilitators primed to ask questions to encourage deeper conversations, such as, well, can you explain to us more about why you value that? And others may feel comfortable enough in the conversation to talk about times when they feel they may not have used their time well, or they may have wasted it. No matter what people bring to our conversations, their input is so valuable, as it helps us build a larger picture about what our congregation views as important when it comes to how they use their time currently, and how their priorities in life change how we approach our own personal stewardship journeys. Please remember, while using any part of the narrative of generosity resource, it is designed to be as flexible as possible to meet the needs of your congregation. So some of you may wish to take the points of the share slides in one go. Others may want to spread them out and to look at some of the points in more detail, or even add your own conversation starters, and that's great, as long as we can achieve our aim in this first stage of the process, which is to get people thinking about stewardship in a broader, more whole life approach, and to get everyone talking about stewardship. Once we have completed our share points, it's now time to reflect. You will see that the first 2 points read, reflect on your own stories and those you have heard from others, and reflect on what it means to be a good steward of time. These 2 points are consistent throughout all 12 reflection sections. Here, we are really asking you to try and pull out the commonalities, themes, and points of interest from the stories shared previously. depending on the conversations had. This could be something as simple as recognising that time, just like money, has a value, and therefore should be stewarded in our lives and congregations with the same priority. Or it could be recognising that a lot of the stories shared were actually personal stories of people valuing their time, and therefore you may recognise a need for creating opportunities to spend valuable and meaningful time together as a congregation. And as you can see from the next two reflection prompts, we are hoping that those engaging with the narrative will do so not only from a congregational point of view, but will also have opportunities to reflect upon their personal stewardship in their day-to-day lives. And as before, how you choose to conduct these reflect sections is up to you. You may want to hold them during the same session as the shares, or you may wish to do them separately. As we have said previously, a member of our team will be more than happy to discuss the best options for your congregations with you if needed. So having done that, we're now going to move on to the third and final phase of share, reflect and act process. And this is where it gets really fun. So far, we have looked at how we have stewarded time in the past through sharing our stories. And we have reflected on what our past actions, experiences and attitudes have meant for how we have approached the stewardship of time. And we've possibly looked at areas that we would like to improve upon or explore further. And act is where we get to do that. At the start of the act slide, you can see a small statement. After having shared and reflected, think about where you want to see your church in the next stage of this theme and contact your stewardship consultant for support and resources. By this point, you may have already approached the stewardship team for help at various stages of the process. And to begin with, when you're looking at your first theme, you may be wanting to talk to us quite a bit until you find your footing. But as you continue, you will most likely find you find your own rhythm, and you need very little or no help during the share and reflect stages. But we always recommend that you get in touch with us when you get to the act section. We do this for several reasons. One of which is that as a team, we are continually creating a bank or a stock of resources that you can use no matter what you're sharing or reflecting. And the points that you have chosen. Whatever you'd wish to act on, we hope that we can equip you and aid you as much as possible as you go forward on that journey. And similarly, we would be able to also share your amazing stewardship journeys with others. In fact, you'll be hearing such a story in a few minutes from Margot. So having got in touch with a stewardship consultant, it's now time to act. Unlike the other two sections we have looked at so far, the points given are not instructions and are not expected to be done. These are solely here to act as examples or possible inspiration for what might be done in your congregation. So for example, the first point here we can see is make small changes in your daily routine to make a more meaningful use of your time. An act point like this may have come out through the share section conversations, where individuals have felt that they are not really valuing their time. They are not considering how they are using it, and they're just trying to fit as much into their day as possible. Therefore, those taking part in the reflection may felt that they needed to support members of the congregation to try and steward their time in more intentional ways and to help them really appreciate the time that they have. Your church might therefore also decide to host a celebration service to reveal with the wider congregation the discussions that happened through a narrative of generosity, and to encourage them to make small changes and share the spiritual importance of doing so. Your congregation might choose to act even further by supplying material, either in person or online, to help people recognise how to use their time. Such resources could be sourced through conversations with the stewardship team. Acts don't have to look a certain way or be a certain thing. They could be small, personal encouragements shared or goals set, but they could equally be large community ventures embarked on together to improve a more widespread approach to stewardship. And as Fiona said earlier, because the resource changes depending on who is engaged and the stories that they bring with them, The reflections and outcomes will also most often change every time the congregation chooses to revisit a theme. But one point that we do encourage each congregation to take part in is to host a celebration service with the wider church to share the process and the outcome of a narrative of generosity. Not only will this recognise the effort and hard work put in by those who took part, but it will also share the opportunity to act out good stewardship practices for those who didn't take part. After all, stewardship isn't just something for a select few, but is a duty that each one of us are called to live out in our daily lives. Now, before I hand back over to Margot to look at another theme within the narrative that you may wish to explore, I want to share something really exciting with you. It is a resource that we have been designing for a while to run alongside the narrative of generosity and is primarily aimed at children and youth. Exploring Generosity will be a 12-part series of resources, each one exploring one of the 12 themes of stewardship. The themes will be released separately instead of as a one-off resource. And at the moment, we have several themes at various stages of development, with the themes of time, earth, and God being the nearest to completion. Just with the narrative of generosity, exploring generosity is designed to be as flexible as possible for those using it. Each theme will come with an introduction to the resource and leader's notes, explaining in more detail the format of it. Each theme will have between 20 and 30 activities, suitable for ages spanning from preschool to S6. These activities will each fall into 4 categories. These are come in, dig in, muck in, and look in. The come in activities are your warm-up activities. These might be games, quizzes, movie clips, or challenges that introduce the theme of the day or the Bible story. So for example, all of the activities in the time theme are based around the Bible story of Mary and Martha. So one of the come in activities for the younger children is, what's the time, Mr. Wolf? You can see that for each activity, you are given a title, an approximate time needed, the ages that it would be best to use it with, instructions which include any equipment needed, and intended learning. In What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? The intended learning may not seem to be of too much importance, but certainly, as we move through the rest of the activities, these intended learnings can become very important to remember. The dig-in activities are where we get the young people to explore the Bible lesson in more detail. This is still done using a variety of age-appropriate methods that will hopefully engage the young people to start them thinking about the impact that the lesson may have on their own lives and their own personal stewardship journeys. The muck-in activities are crafts or food activities. These are designed to solidify learning from the main activities, to act as a reminder of the Bible lesson or the stewardship theme, and to prompt further conversation. The activities offered are of varying levels of creativity needed, but are well explained and, most importantly, fun for the young people to take part in. The final activities in each theme are the look-in activities. These are usually prayer or reflective activities for groups and individuals, and we hope that they act as an encouragement to the young people to take forward their learning from the session and to apply it to their day-to-day lives. As I said earlier, Exploring Generosity is designed to be a pick and mix resource. We hope that this means that it can be used no matter your local setting, whether it be using a whole session at a church for toddlers, Sunday school, or youth group, or whether it is handpicking an individual activity for use during an all-age talk in a service or during a school assembly by school chaplains. We are really excited about this resource and the opportunities that it may allow us to start talking to our young people of our church about stewardship. If you would like more information about exploring generosity, or if you would like to offer support in trialling some of our resources, please feel free to get in touch with us by emailing stewardship@churchofscotland.org.uk. But for now, Let's get back to the narrative of generosity. Margot, over to you.
Hello, everyone. When you're planning a stewardship initiative, be it a special Sunday or a longer stewardship season, please contact the stewardship consultants at an early stage. We have experience of partnering numerous congregations in all parts of Scotland and in the Presbytery of England. We can help you discern which of the 12 themes might suit your needs and help you encourage and reconnect with your membership and parish. But whatever theme you choose, we would all say that the starting point for any stewardship initiative must be rooted in worship. Imagine that your Kirk session choose the theme of earth to work through as a congregation. From the highest of heights to the depths of the sea, creations revealing your majesty. From the colours of fall to the fragrance of spring, every creature unique in the song that it sings, all exclaiming, indescribable, uncontainable, you place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. These words from the popular contemporary worship song, Indescribable, were written by Laura Story and inspired by Job, chapter 38. As Fiona said earlier, the statement of faith behind the whole narrative of generosity resource is that God has gifted us with the role of stewards of a world which brims with abundance, not scarcity. The Bible does not teach that we humans own the world and can use it how we like. The Bible declares that we manage creation on behalf of Yahweh and in ways that reflect his love for it. In their book, Practicing the King's Economy, Michael Rhodes and Robbie Holt point to Genesis chapter 9, where God partnered Noah and his descendants in a covenant of blessing and grace. But more than that, God entered into a committed relationship with the earth itself and every human and living creature on the earth. And in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, God gives the Israelites laws as guidance for life in the promised land. Many of these laws invite Israel to practice justice and righteousness in caring for the world and its creatures. In the Psalms and in the stories that Jesus told to his disciples, the complexity and beauty of the world is celebrated. Some Christians have seen the earth as an inexhaustible resource. Others say that it does not matter how we use the earth, because God is rescuing our souls from sin so that he can destroy the earth and take us to a life of bliss in heaven. But the fact is that the already and not yet dynamic of the kingdom in the New Testament applies both to Jesus' followers and to the created world itself. Romans chapter 8 explains that the earth and sky and animals and waters, along with all their living creatures, long for liberation from their bondage to decay, just as we do. The good news is that Jesus is rescuing sinners, and astoundingly, the rest of creation's liberation is bound up with the liberation of God's human image bearers. Since God created us to take care of his good creation, his work in redeeming us restores us back to this vocation. This call is to all of us. Some people will have specific vocations focused on healing the world and also protecting and securing its flourishing. But for many of us, this is new territory, and we're only beginning to seriously consider these matters for the first time. By using the 4 earth slides from the narrative of generosity, this aspect of stewardship might be enlivened within your congregation. So let's take a look at the share slide from earth. In large groups or small, during worship or perhaps at the guild or walking group or whatever, people from all age groups could describe a beautiful place they saw on holiday or show the group a photo of a lovely view. If you enjoy gardening, explain the joy you get from cultivating vegetables or flowers. If you own a pet, explain the responsibilities and joys of this. Invite a local farmer to talk about whether it has been a good harvest this year and why or why not. Perhaps your home groups could watch one of the many TV programs on the subject together as a starting point for conversations. Or you might invite a member of the Church of Scotland's Faith Impact Forum to speak during Sunday worship, followed by conversations and exchanges of experiences in small groups. In the lead up to the COP26 summit in Glasgow this November, eco-congregations, Christians Together in Britain and Ireland, and many other lobby groups and environmental bodies have prepared resources that could be used as conversation starters. And now for the reflect stage. As you take time to reflect individually or as a group, use the time to open yourselves up to the leading of the Holy Spirit as he challenges our ingrained prejudices and treasured practices. Many of us in Scotland are somewhat sheltered from significant aspects of water pollution, lack of waste disposal, or catastrophic damage to the environment. Perhaps you could cut out photos and articles from magazines and newspapers for a wall display, which shows how the poor of the world are so badly affected by this, and ponder on whether our actions are contributing to their circumstances. How do we find the correct balance between preserving and protecting the created world and pursuing economic and cultural development? Then act upon your reflections. We have to admit now that we all find it difficult to change our ways, but be determined to make sacrifices, acknowledging that rapid and far-reaching change is required of us all. Pray for the world leaders at COP26, that fine words would be turned into positive action this time around. Use the Exploring Generosity resource that Ashley mentioned. The section on Earth will enthuse your children and teenagers. They are often more clued up on the subject than we are. Take your lead from their eagerness to see creation flourish, and then act in meaningful, appropriate steps for you and your families, your churches, and your businesses. There is room for debate, and some proposed actions may strike you as more convincing than others. That's okay, but pick 2 or 3 actions that make sense in your situation and follow them through. For example, the other day, Ashley was telling me about Steps Parish Church in Glasgow Presbytery, whose minister preached on earth, fire, wind, and water over 4 weeks. At the end of this, the congregation decided to plant a tree and install a fellowship bench in their church garden. Another action you could decide on might be to shop locally and investigate local producers and farmers' markets when you plan meals and snacks for your church cafe. Some of your teenagers might be inspired to consider careers in soil ecology, forestry, renewable energy, and much more. And if the people in your community with the least amount of money have no access to healthy food, you can pray and meet with other community groups to begin dreaming about how to help without hurting. Some churches offer free cooking lessons to the community. I'm sure you will come up with many other agreed actions, but don't rush it and jump to the end. First share, then reflect, then act. Now, back to Pauline again.
Thank you, Margot. That's really helped us see the importance of rooting our themes in worship and theological reflection. So thank you for going into such depth there, Margot. It's really helpful. For the next 10 minutes, we're going to touch briefly on the remaining themes so that you can get a flavour of the breadth of the resource. At the end of this section, we're going to try out a little electronic poll, inviting you to indicate 3 themes that might be most relevant to your congregation. So that means you have to listen to the next bit. So what better place to start than with stewarding and nurturing our relationship with God? This theme encourages individuals to share with each other about their faith, about their prayer life, about the challenges and barriers that get in the way of their time with God. The actions from this theme might include having a renewed focus on personal prayer and Bible study. It might include an interactive prayer event in your church. It might be supporting people to talk more openly about their faith in their everyday interactions. And it may be an opportunity to review your church's programme to incorporate more time and space for spiritual reflection and meaningful conversations. The gifts theme encourages us to exercise and share our gifts, skills and talents, and to provide space for everyone to discover theirs. We encourage initial sharing around times when we've been blessed or helped through another person's gifts. Also, though, around what may have prevented us from using our gifts, skills and talents. The actions from this stewardship theme might include holding a workshop to help people hone in on their gifts and passions and how these can be used within the life of the church. Or encouraging individuals to take on responsibility for particular projects or work. Or simply recognising and celebrating the gifts that are already exercised within your congregation. This links nicely to the volunteers theme, which encourages us to enable, support and develop those who already give of their time and energy in a myriad of ways. Verse 9 of Galatians chapter 6 encourages us to not grow weary of doing good, but we all need to be supported in our service. This theme would work well for helping your congregation consider the impact that volunteers have had in your church, and for encouraging people on the edges to consider getting more involved. The actions from this stewardship journey might include holding a thank you event for all of the volunteers who bring something to the life of your congregation and community, and using that event to inspire others to volunteer too. The relationships theme helps us consider how to cultivate and nurture healthy and meaningful relationships. Our love for one another demonstrates God's love for us. So this theme touches on issues such as how to reflect God's nature in our relationships and how we might help to reach out to those who are lonely or isolated, how the church can better facilitate friendship and fellowship. This theme might work well in a situation of a changed congregation, a new union perhaps. I think we all have a renewed perspective on just how important our interactions with others are, and our need for each other. The youth theme starts with these words: we partner with God as we're led to support young people on their life journey, to uphold them in a rapidly changing world, and to care for them as they face the pressures of contemporary culture. This theme helps us reflect on whether the young people in our congregations are encouraged to take a full role in the life of the church, and whether there are opportunities for the congregation to engage with younger people out with the church. The actions from this theme might include incorporating a more intergenerational approach to your church programme and decision-making processes. It might include engaging with community groups which are already working with young people in your area, or being more intentional about offering leadership opportunities to your younger members. The money theme looks at the early church and encourages reflection on how our faith affects our relationship with money. As well as encouraging intentional personal giving, the actions from this theme might include exploring additional streams of income for your congregation and its projects, or looking at ways your congregation could reduce unnecessary expenditure. The stewardship team can provide additional resources whichever direction you take. The possessions theme is a really good one to get your teeth into if you're a church in need of an overhaul. This theme can challenge the individual to reflect on the value they place on material things, but it can also be used collectively to consider the resources your congregation might need to increase its effectiveness. The actions from this stewardship theme might include undertaking a church inventory. How exciting does that sound? And having a big clear out project, or doing a fundraiser to pay for new youth club equipment, or seeking grant funding for an audio-visual upgrade. The mind theme may seem quite far removed from other stewardship material you've come across, but why shouldn't we be encouraging people to take care of their mental health for their well-being? This might simply be about creating space for people to talk about what inspires their thinking and how they care for their minds. Or a retreat day with a guest speaker might be just what's needed. This theme might be the catalyst for your congregation doing something more focused to get alongside people. I know of a number of churches which run cafes for dementia sufferers and their carers. The Heart for Art project has been a tremendous success too. A simple action might be to provide a room for personal prayer and quiet reflection within your church building, a place of calm. Similarly, the body theme takes seriously our physical well-being, encouraging us to talk about how we look after ourselves and to consider some of the barriers to healthy living within our communities. This might be an opportunity to work alongside the Keep Fit class that uses your church hall, to engage them in the sharing and reflecting. The actions from this stewardship theme might include choosing a time when your people and community come together to participate in a healthy activity, or reviewing whether your church building is as accessible as it could be for those with mobility impairments, for the visually impaired, or those who are hard of hearing. Finally, the vision theme. What does it mean to be faithful stewards of our vision? This is really a theme for the whole congregation. If you have a clear vision, using this theme will help you keep it in focus. If you don't have a clear vision, this theme can open up the subject, looking back at what the church has already achieved and how it's had to adapt, and looking forward to consider the changed and emerging needs of your congregation and community. So there we have it, our introduction to the 12 themes of the narrative of generosity. At this point, we'd like to try our poll and ask you to choose which 3 of the themes you think might be most useful to your congregation over the next few months. We'll give you a minute to complete it. It will come up in a second. There are no right and wrong answers. We're just looking for a steer on where your priorities might be for the next period of time, or the themes that resonated with you personally. So Ashley will keep us right now on how we go about this.
So hopefully that should have been launched. So please feel free to look over the answers given. Because there are so many themes, we've had to spread them between the 2 options, but please feel free to select the 3 over questions 1 and 2. And we just have about 10 seconds left. So hopefully you all managed to get your votes in. I will try and share the results with you, and maybe Pauline can talk you through.
Thanks, Ashley. Interesting to see these. You might just need to scroll down to see all of the results. There's a fair spread there, with Earth having 37% there. Margot, you've sold it well. Money, you know, with an audience maybe primarily of congregational treasurers, that's probably not a great surprise. It's still important, and we would agree that that's the case. In all of these stories, your actions will probably have to be resourced in some way, so money comes into all of them. But that's really helpful for us, just to get a steer. Volunteers, 40%. How much do we rely on those volunteers to keep the church going? So yeah, I agree, that's a really important one. So thank you very much for participating in that poll. We're going to move into our Q&A session now, but before we do that, I'd like to invite Dave Kendall to say a few words just to encourage us all. Thanks, Dave, for being with us tonight. I'll hand over to you now. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Pauline, and good evening, everyone. It's always so difficult to follow the stewardship team presentations because they're such a high standard, aren't they? My only disappointment tonight, I wasn't allowed to vote, but I guess that goes with the territory, doesn't it? Firstly, I'd like to thank the ladies for another great and very thought-provoking evening, thinking about generosity, the power of storytelling, and examples from the themes for the narrative of generosity. It's really good as well to see the approach being extended to young people, because it's such a key area for our church. And the importance of this being rooted in our worship really resonates with me. I'll tell you why in a second. I've been at the stewardship webinars, not just because it's such an important part of our Christian life, or just because I want to support the team, but I am also a church member, an elder in my congregation, and one of my Kirk's worship group. On a personal level, I've been really inspired by what I've heard in the previous webinars and tonight. And this has resulted in my church's worship team developing a 6-week theme on giving, looking at a number of aspects of the topic, which we're starting in September. We're going to look at things like the basis of giving, the joy of it, the cost of it, the benefits, missional giving and holistic giving. And this will bring us the opportunity to introduce the themes from the narrative through our weekly worship, and also link into the National Giving Day as well. So I hope you feel as inspired as I do by what you've heard, because it's so important to us. I'm sure we will have all taken something away from tonight and take it forward ourselves in our local situation. And I'm really looking forward now to hearing your stories about what you took away and how we can take this forward as a church. So thank you so much, ladies. I can't wait to hear what questions and answers are, but as ever, an excellent job.
Thank you very much, Dave. So thankfully, we've come to the Q&A part. It's when we stop talking and, well, we still talk some more, but we get to hear a bit more of your opinions there. So we do have a couple of questions in already that we'll get started on, but please feel free to keep putting any questions that you have into the Q&A section. So the first question we have is from Karen, and we will answer it just now. She's saying, is it now COVID safe for office bearers to count weekly cash offerings on the day they are received, or does the cash need to be quarantined? I realise this is not a stewardship query, but an important one. I'm going to first of all say it is an important one because I was away to find that out for one of my congregations tomorrow morning. So if somebody has an answer for me, that would be very good.
I'm happy to take it, Ashley. I would say where possible, we should try and use contactless giving. And a plug here for previous webinars that the stewardship team have done, which are available on their YouTube channel. So you can check that out. And Fiona Penny is also our resident expert. So feel free to drop the team any questions you have on that. But in terms of do you need to quarantine cash, I would say no. You know, you've got to use common sense. I would say one person doing it whilst another kind of looks on. You can use gloves if you do have to count cash, and maintain sort of hygiene and sanitize and everything like that to keep yourself safe. Okay.
Thank you very much, Leanne. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Nope. Perfect. So we've got another question from Tom, and perhaps Pauline, you'd be able to answer this one. He just says, can you send hard copies of the narrative of generosity out to churches?
Well, given that we're mainly based at home at the moment, I would say we're reliant on digital copies, but where it really isn't possible for you, you know, where digital copies really aren't of use to you and you need a hard copy, just email the stewardship team direct and we'll arrange that with the few members of staff who are in the office from time to time. Yeah, so let us know if you need it that way, but it really is a digital resource. The slides are set up for PowerPoint so that you can share them, you know, in a presentation format, and you can email them out to your Kirk session. But yeah, we'll be as helpful as we can be with within current restrictions.
And also just to add to that, actually you may have said that and I may have just skipped over it, so apologies if you did, Pauline. But the resources are all available through the Resourcing Mission shop. The link was at the start of the PowerPoint at the beginning of the webinar. So it's available for free download there, but all that information will be getting sent out after the webinar as well. So Hilary has asked, please can you send out the poll results to me? It's interesting, I only got as far as volunteers. Apologies, 1 minute does go very quickly, but again, yes, we will send those out with the rest of the Q&A questions and any other information that we have to send out. Drew says, I'm doing this a bit blind as I'm just about to be ordained into my first charge. Would there be someone who from the team can speak to the two sessions I'll have? And how soon would I be looking to introduce this 2 sessions? Margot, would you like to speak on going out or speak to that one?
Absolutely. All of us, all 4 of us would be very, very keen to speak. Just just email into stewardship, and also I think at the beginning we will, or at the end as well, we've all got individual email addresses, but what we would normally do is speak to your Kirk session or speak to a small team first, whatever's best, just to listen to you a wee bit and then speak to the session afterwards. But that's what we're here for, Drew. We're here to be used. Please use us. We're kind of vaguely geographically split. So you don't say in your question which presbytery you're from, but tell us in a longer email and we'll get back to you very, very quickly. Thanks for that, Drew.
That's definitely the exciting part of the job, is going out and managing to talk to everybody. So yes, we will we will talk to people. So we've got a question from Elaine here saying, I agree that exploring generosity sounds interesting, but wonder if there will be any materials for intergenerational purposes. Too often children and young people and adults are separated. And as a team, we totally agree with that as well. We've had conversations and meetings with members of the Faith Nurture Forum. I'm getting the nod that I'm getting it correct, and talking about the need for intergenerational purposes to our resources as well. So while they are aimed at children and young people, a lot of them can be used for intergenerational purposes. And like we said, maybe using a couple of the warm-up activities for all age conversations. And personally as well, I have sometimes used the dig-in sections actually as the basis for a sermon talk. So there is lots of scope for using them and lots of interactive prayers that can be used intergenerationally, and just use them to fit your situation, as hopefully they can work for that. The next question is from Colin. Can you provide a link for the YouTube sessions on contactless giving? Again, we would be more than happy to send that out with the other information. Does anyone have anything you want to add to that? Oh, Fiona.
Yeah, just to say that really there is so much information about contactless giving that the best way is to get in touch with us, and we can meet to discuss your personal situation, and it's a lot easier then to tailor the advice to the things that might suit your congregation best. So please, again, do get in touch. Thanks, Colin.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Fiona. And we've got a question again for Exploring Generosity from David, saying, when will the Exploring Generosity for young people be completed? Hopefully we're working as quickly as we can. Unfortunately, the pandemic put quite a hold on when we were wanting it out. But like we said, we will be releasing them theme by theme. So as soon as we can get them done and as soon as we can trial them and make sure that they're the perfect resource, we will be making them available to congregations. And hopefully the first couple should be available relatively soon in the coming months. But definitely we'll try and get all that to you as quickly as possible.
I just wanted to add, Ashley, I think you are looking for congregations to trial it. So if David, I know David's on the borders, so I don't know if he would be willing, but is that not true? You're looking for congregations?
Definitely, yes. No, feel free.
Yeah,
if you want to get your hands on a specific theme earlier, we would love volunteers. I know that a church in Glasgow has already said, we'll be guinea pigs, can we just get our hands on them? So definitely we are open to more people. We've just had a question in from another David. He says, brilliant presentation, thank you. Well, thank you very much, David. He says, do you consider that the outcomes of the narrative of generosity sessions are primarily to support your walk at an individual level or aimed at the church congregation level? Pauline, do you want to take that one?
I do. I was just going to point out that the question was there. Yeah, I think it's both and. I think what we would hope is that congregations engage with this, and that actually the sharing of stories is something that's done together. And I think there's a lot of value in there that's really hard to outline on paper, you know, but if you can just imagine people engaging in these kind of conversations and learning more about each other, you know, that in itself is, you know, could have a really great impact in our congregations. But yeah, there are a lot of actions coming out of the themes that will hopefully help a person in their individual walk of faith and to become, you know, better disciples and to steward, you know, every part of their life. So it's both and, but the questions that we ask is really to try and get conversations started, because we learn so much from those.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Pauline. So at the moment, we've actually worked through all our Q&A sessions, or all our questions that have been submitted. So I'll maybe give it a minute or two more to see if anyone has any last questions that they want to submit. But there's no need to drag this out until 1:45, because I'm sure everyone's had a long night. So maybe just for a little bit longer while we're seeing if there's any more questions coming in. Just a reminder that no matter what stage your congregation is at about getting back into person, whether you're still meeting online, whether you're unsure about the future, no matter what, the narrative can also be used through online resources, having meetings on Zoom and sharing your share reflects, saving your acts for later or doing your acts now. Lots of things can be done, as churches have proven over the last 18 months. The pandemic hasn't stopped us, and hopefully the narrative can just help us going no matter what situation your congregation is in. So just putting that out there, but at the moment I don't see any other questions. So ladies, unless we have anything else to add, Pauline, I'll
Just we were going to ask one more question of people, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, we've got one more poll. This one will be anonymous, and it will just be a single answer. And this is really just for our use within the team to find out what you're thinking of the narrative and whether you think it could be used in your congregation. So what we will do is I'll publish that just now. And once you've answered that, it will take less than 30 seconds. Then we hope you have a lovely evening. So before I publish that and send you all on your way, on behalf of the team, could we just say thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely. We've had about just almost 150 of us joining this evening. And hopefully we'll be hearing from you soon and be getting to share in your narrative journeys. Thank you for joining us. If you need us at all, please feel free to reach out to stewardship@churchofscotland.org.uk, or you can find us on Facebook and YouTube, or through the Church of Scotland website. And yeah, thank you very much, and you will be getting emails through within the next week or so with all the questions from the session and any other bits of information. So thank you very much for your time, and we hope you have a lovely evening.